Hello there, welcome to Kanpai Chronicles, where we talk about all things related to the art of yabai, the art of the dangerous life in Japan, with your hosts, Norman and
Holly.
And yes, we are going to be diving straight into the very first full episode of Kanpai Chronicles, where we are saying cheers to life in Japan, because
Hey.
the both of us have lived there a number of years ago. In 2015. Well, 2015 for me, in the very beginning of 2015 for me. And
I came in towards the end of that year,
yeah, in the second half of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might as well dive into like why we wanted to start the show in the first place. I know that you were thinking of a show like this before.
Yeah. I had started like making YouTube videos, I think in 2013 or 14. And when I started applying to study abroad, I was like, oh, I wanna start making videos. One of my like internet friends, Charla, from like Charla in Japan, I was like, I want to do that. And so I started making these videos. And then when I came to Japan, I was basically just a hot mess the whole time. And so like the videos I made weren't like travel around with me. They were kind of more like silly, where like sometimes I would talk about stuff. And then one night I was drinking, and me and friend Micah, we were like, let's make a video. And I was like, yeah, let's just be drunk and talk about stuff. We'll call it Kanpai Chronicles. And so we like filmed something, and it was like it was a mess. I have it saved somewhere. I don't think it's like live anymore, but we were talking about like what kind of fantasy world we would want to live in or something. And it was just a mess. And since like I came back to America from Japan, I've been trying to figure out how I can like use the things that I have like learned and experienced there into like my content that I put out like now in various ways, because Japan was like such a growing experience for me, and culturally, like I'm just very invested in it, but I don't really know what I want to do with that like in my life. And when you and I chat, we always start reminiscing about the old days. So it's like, why not record that? Why not have fun with that?
Yeah, honestly, those conversations are super meaningful. Like I cherish a lot of them. And you're based in the US now. I'm based in Malaysia, and we have like half a day's difference in time zone. And it's been a number of years since we've left Japan, and I feel like it's a pretty good default to go back to whenever we're catching up to like see, how are you going, and how's it going and all that. Whenever we are catching up and we are reminiscing, I feel like there's this like element of I miss those times, because those were the times when it was fun, but it was also a learning experience. It wasn't exactly it wasn't like great the entire time, right? There were some parts that were quite critical, and maybe some parts that were quite depressing. And I'm sure we'll probably explore that another time. But I thought that it would be a great place to start from what will led you to actually create the idea of Kanpai Chronicles, by describing how that year 2015 came about from my side. Because from my side, I studied in Australia, and I had an international studies degree, and it came with a mandatory 1-year program to exchange. So I studied Japanese in Sydney, and then I got into Rikkyo University, which is obviously the best university in the whole wide world, in Tokyo, in Japan.
Represent
Rikkyo, represent. I rep purple all the time. Purple's my favorite color because of Rikkyo. I love it. Right. Best March uni ever. March being MARCH, an acronym for a certain set of like second tier universities. R in there is Rikkyo. And yeah, I remember getting accepted and being like, what the hell is this uni? I've never heard of this before, because I was trying to go into like Todai. I was trying to go into Tokyo Uni, but I got into Rikkyo, and came to Rikkyo spring like April 2015. Had my first semester, had a lot of fun. And in second semester, that was when you came in, right?
Hmm.
So we were in the Asakarai dorm, and you're
Gang,
going to be
gang.
the Asakarai squad, because you're going to hear this a lot, right? You're going to hear this a lot. Asakarai is it's not like the best neighborhood or anything like that, right? So for Rikyo, there are a number of dormitories for exchange students, for international students, and there are three main ones, and they carry the names of the respective areas that they are in, right? So
Hmm.
you have Shiki, which is not that far from Rikyu University, the Ikebukuro campus.
Hmm.
You have Shinamachi, which is also not that far away from the campus. And then you have Asakadai, which is also not that far away. It's like a 15-minute, 20-minute train ride, I believe, on the
Hmm.
Tobu Tojo line, which is
Yep, yep.
what a nostalgic line. Also known as the suicide line, but we're probably going to be
Yeah, oh
covering
my
that
god,
another time.
yeah. There would be a whole spiel on that.
Yeah, I would love to do an episode on suicide, which sounds like a
Mm.
crazy ass thing
Like,
to say.
no, but for Japan, like, yeah, I feel like it's needed. So,
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to glorify the experience. I really want to
oh
surface
yeah.
up what we notice about people.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
either an episode on suicide, an episode on loneliness, I think
yeah,
will be a
yeah.
great thing to cover, especially
There's a
there.
lot of like deeper, darker, gritty aspects to Japan that I also want to talk about. Like, it's not all like anime and hentai boobies. Like, so we talk about some real shit.
Yeah, I got past the hentai booby phase, like when I went there, and I'm like, oh, it's not as it's not as like lovely as I thought it was. Like that, I got some culture shocks, but it wasn't really in the way that I was like expecting it to be.
Had
So
to like tone down your inner weeb.
yeah, I had to take off my Naruto like my Naruto
Yeah.
headband and be like, what? What? These girls aren't 2D. What the fuck? So so I yeah, I mean I had a lot of culture shocks in that first semester.
Mm,
Um joined the dance crew and everything. And then I also joined the dance crew as well. I continued with that in second semester. And that was when we met, right?
yeah.
Do you remember how we met the first time?
Um, I think so. My version, because I didn't realize this until later. So when I came in to Japan, I got in like super late,
Yep, I remember
and
that.
so I couldn't check into the dorm when I first got there. I think I got to Asakurai at like 1 a.m. And so I checked into like this like business hotel, which I didn't know it was a business hotel. Like, I didn't understand this concept, and like the whole site when I booked this night, it was like in Japanese, and I'm just like doing my best to like figuring it out. So I get to this place in the middle of the night, and I'm like, cool, okay, and I stay there for the night. And then when I wake up and like come down to check out, it's just all like businessmen having breakfast, and I'm just like, oh, okay. And then go like walk over to like the dorm, and so then it's interesting for me to kind of look back on this stuff now, because like I was like recently, like diagnosed with autism.
Yeah.
And so it adds like a whole new layer onto like my experience. But I remember like going into like the dorm, and like dorm papa is like only speaking to me in like Japanese, and I'm just like, fucking no, like what's going on here? Like, what am I just have these like bags with me? And then I can't remember who it was, if it was Yui or Tomo, but one of them was like there, and they're like, I'll like show her like where her room is basically. And then I think you had come out of like your room in like your fucking like pajama pants and stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't like, I think you said like hi to me, like you were trying to like be friendly and engaged, but I'm like the most fucking awkward person to meet. And I was just like avoiding like looking at anybody's face. And I was just like, yeah, hi. And just
I
like
remember that
got into
very,
the
very
elevator.
well. I
Yeah.
remember that very, very well.
Yeah.
Because this was early in the morning, I think. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think, and
Yeah.
I think it was Yui. So for context, right? dorm papa is the dorm manager, who is this like oji-san, and like this
Mm,
oji-san okasan, who is like
mhm,
is this old couple who works as the branch manager or the dorm manager for the dormitory for the students. And um, sometimes you have Japanese students who can work as the dorm residents, or like the, shall we say, the coordinators for a number of things related to the dorm. Like they provide support to international students pretty much.
mhm,
And during that time, there was Yui, who is a lovely girl, very very sweet, very very innocent,
mhm,
and Tomo, who is a great guy, very lovely, huge baseball fan, uh,
mhm.
pretty awesome. And my favorite dorm resident, Mr. Kojun, always
Oh,
there.
Kojun.
Love that guy. Shout outs to all three of them because they are lovely
You're right.
people. They are
They
helping
put up
us.
with so much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like we are so like we're just throwing our gaijin card in like every direction, and
Oh,
then they were so
yeah.
patient with us.
Yeah.
So I think I remember when I met you the first time, because it was early in the morning and I heard a lot of like just noise out on the lobby. For context, my room is like 8 steps from the dorm lobby. I'm on the ground floor. Like pretty much anyone can just like bang on my door. Like can just knock on my door. Like
Mm,
that's how close I am to the lobby. So if anyone's talking,
mhm.
I'd be like creeping up from my door. I'd be like, "Yo, what up?" Right? Where is there a party out there? Um,
7
and
a.m. in the morning.
yeah, and so the residents were out talking to someone, and that was you. And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Might as well just say hi." And I remember being I remember being excited meeting people. So it's funny that you point out that I was trying to be engaged and sociable, because I think I was trying to do that. I was being engaged and sociable with everybody, maybe out of a worry or fear, or out of the need to prevent certain things from happening, because
Mm,
I was already there for one semester before. So there
yeah.
was me and a few other people, right? Myself
And that
and
shift, yeah, that shift between like the first and second semester is hard.
yeah,
Like I went through that, so
yeah.
I
And
get, yeah.
yeah, so there was the first semester, and then the first semester ended, and then there was summer vacation, and then everyone that I made memories with were just gone, right? Except a few
Mhm.
key people, right? Notably
Saba?
me and Saba. Shout outs to
Yeah.
Saba. If you're listening to this,
Right.
yo, what up? Um, I miss you, Saba, by the way. You annoy me a lot, but I miss you. I miss you. Still not gonna forgive you about that waffle thing. But anyway, that's
Waffle.
she'll know that. Yeah, I think you know how like the dorm hall has like food schedules, and there's like waffle
Mm,
day or pancake day or something, and I keep missing
mm.
it, and I love waffles and pancakes. So she thought that she would help me by like ringing my doorbell 8 times. Like I heard my doorbell 8 times. Like, you know how pissed I was? Like, I was so angry with her.
She was just trying to make sure you got your waffles.
Yeah, I know, but what the fuck? Like, who the fuck rings your bell like 8 times?
I
Anyway,
me.
if you did that in the beginning of the semester, I would fucking hate you. But that was not
Just
a good
every
impression.
night come down.
Hey, waffle. Hey, waffle. Hey. So yeah, there was that, like, it was the peak of that exchange euphoria. You made a lot of friends and memories with people, and then they're all gone, and all of a sudden the dorm is like empty. And the
Mm,
beginning of second semester is orientation once again, so that's when all the new students were coming in. So I thought, like, I wanted to play the role of someone who wanted to make sure that things are not as awkward when you're coming in, and like getting used to things in the dorm, because I had that when I came in my first semester, and
yeah.
I was actually very appreciative of it. So I wanted to carry that gift forward. And the other thing was that um, I thought that by playing the role of this guy who was just a magnet for conversation, or like being sociable, etc., then it would let people know that it's okay. You don't have to, put up a shell for so long in the dorm,
Mm,
because in the end we're all in exchange, and we're all learning things together. So might as well bring
yeah.
down that barrier. But yeah, I remember you first time. I said hi, and then you were like looking down like, oh, and you quickly run to the elevator. I'm like, what a bitch! Like,
Who's this bitch? Yeah.
what an asshole. It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. But you know, first impressions, they sometimes they can be like that, so I don't mind.
I came around.
Yeah, and throughout that semester, we seen a lot of stuff, made a lot of memories with everyone together. Um, a lot of friendships were made.
Mm.
Uh, a lot of drama as well, as we've noticed. And I left in 2016 February,
Mhm.
and you stayed on for your second semester. So
Yep.
the both of us have had experiences that are like our overlap is that like one
Yeah.
semester, and then we have our own respective semesters in between.
Yeah.
So I think like
Yeah.
diving into that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that would
But
actually be. I haven't heard too much about like your first semester aside from like what's his name? Fucking Jason.
yes, yes, Team Smash. Uh,
Stop.
Smash. Shout outs to Jason, Yassine, and Josh. Basically, Team Smash Bros. Um, one of the guys, Yassine, a guy from Canada, brought in TV and also a hacked Nintendo Wii and set up a section to play Super Smash Bros. In his room. And his room is like the ground floor room. So like we
Oh,
like after putting in air quotes here for our listeners, a hard day's work. After a hard day's work,
right, yeah.
me and the guys would like go out of the dorm, uh, go to the block behind the dorm, and then there's a vending machine that for some reason has Mountain Dew. And it's not just any Mountain Dew. It's like the normal size, and then there's like the super size Mountain Dew. It's like 500, 700 milliliters of like Mountain Dew. And you've seen Japanese vending machines. They don't
Right.
normally have Mountain Dew.
No. I don't think I ever. I'm trying to remember if I ever saw Mountain Dew in Japan when I was there. Well, I don't know.
Yeah. And,
Maybe.
the only vending machine I've ever seen with Mountain Dew is the one behind the dorm. So Asagara I represent, we got that fucking Mountain Dew right there in the neighborhood. So like,
Foreigners live here.
yeah, them kids, like they'd be like high on like caffeine from like Mountain Dew as they're like
Right.
doing skating tricks just like right behind the block. So
You're right.
you can tell we're pretty ratchet. But anyway, yeah, we would like get Mountain Dew and then we'd like bring it back and then play Smash Bros until like 1 a.m. And it was to the point where like some of the students on the second floor could hear us because we were so hype that you could hear us
Oh my
beyond the
god,
balcony.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, those are good times.
We got in so much trouble for being loud. Do you remember when the dorm mom came to your room and like freaked out that one time? You guys had like okay, so you remember how we like stole the cone from like Shinjuku and we
Yes.
would put the cone out for like this designates like where the party room is tonight?
Yes, the party cone. I love it.
There was where did you guys get it? From some
It was
it's okay to talk.
I remember this. I remember this. So this was Jesper stole this. I remember this.
No,
So
I'm not talking about the cone. I remember bringing the cone back from like some shady like seedy night in fucking Shinjuku, no, Shibuya,
Shibuya,
and
yeah.
like on the fucking train with it, just like smuggling this cone across the city. But the night that dorm mom came to your room, like freaking out, at some point in some night out, someone had taken like a champagne bottle from like a club.
Oh, that was
And
me. That was me.
yeah. And for whatever reason, dumbass, like you didn't know that there was nothing in this bottle. And so you guys went out onto the balcony to like pop this bottle of champagne and like nothing happened. So everyone was like yelling and screaming. And then like suddenly there's this like bang on your door. All the girls are hiding because we're not supposed to like mix genders in these rooms. We're all just like, oh no. And she's just like, Urusayo! We're like, oh shit. And Sid of all people was the one who was like going to like talk to her in his like fluent Japanese, like, oh,
Yeah.
so sorry, like we'll calm down.
I remember this. Oh yeah, okay. Well, a backstory on that champagne bottle. It was a Moe champagne bottle
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
stole from a, what do you call that? Like a soap cannon or like soap party, like clubbing event. Basically, there's like a,
Oh, those like bubble
yeah, it's
bubble
like a,
bubble party.
yeah, like a bubble party. I forgot the name for it. Like there's supposed to be a specific phrase for it. Maybe I'll just find it later. But
Yeah, when you say
basically,
soap, it makes me think of Soapland. So
yeah,
maybe
Soapland. Yeah.
Soapland party.
Yeah, I nearly walked into one. That was that was kind of
Oh,
pretty funny. Yeah.
oh,
Apparently, supposedly there was like a Japanese requirement. Like you gotta
I
speak in
believe it.
Japanese
Yeah.
full on. Yeah.
Right.
Um, yeah, freaking Saba. Anyway, yeah. I
Yeah.
blame Saba for a lot of things here. So I'm really sorry, Saba. Yeah, so backstory on that champagne. So of course, Team Smash was out for clubbing, and we went to this summer themed party where there were these cannons that shot out soap or bubbles, pretty much, and it was pretty fun and cool until you actually stand in front of the cannon and then have the soap hit you, because you eat that shit and it does not taste
Right.
good. So like I remember we were pretty drunk off our ass, and then
Mm.
Jason was like, "Yeah, the cannon's starting," and then we stand in front of the cannon and we're having fun. But then, like literally 5 seconds later, his eyes were red, and then both our mouths were full of soap, and we're like, "I hate this. I don't like this anymore." Anyway, yeah, that was a crazy night. But then at the end of the night, we saw these champagne bottles, and they were in the potted plants, like, and there were many, like a
Mm.
lot of them, and we were still drunk. And Jason was like, "Dude, there's just Moe bottles everywhere. We should just take one." And he's like scouring around for like spare bottles of alcohol that like people left behind because they're
Mhm.
too drunk, they can't finish it, or whatever. He
Right.
found
Right.
one. He found one. I was like, "Oh, let me try to get one too." So I got this Moe bottle that was on this potted plant, not at a table that people were hanging around drinking at. And then I kept that bottle in my fridge for months until the second semester, where we had this. And I think I remember I think I remember this night specifically because I've never had the oji-san or okasan to actually come in and complain to my room until this
Yeah.
time. And I think we had this party in my room because that was one of the last days that I was going to be in Japan. So
Mm.
I was gonna like I had this like I made this big announcement about like popping open the champagne bottle to celebrate, like, oh, my time in Japan or whatever. And then I remember like me and Jesper were like pointing it out the balcony, and then we tried to pop it, and we thought it's gonna be a really big thing. And then when we opened it, there was like
Just
just
nothing
completely empty,
happens.
and it just looked so fucking stupid. So everybody was rowdy, and I just looked like an idiot, and my I couldn't escape because it's my own room, right? I had
You just had to live with your shame.
Yeah, I had to live with my shame, and we got scolded. But you know, good times, good times.
Mhm.
And the more that I realized this, the more that we talk about this, rather, the more that I realized how un-Japanese we were with a lot of our
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. It's it's kind of because it's like for me being outside of it now, it's like you'll see kind of when other people are being like rowdy and stuff like in Japan and you're like, "Oh my god, stupid foreigners, like get it together." But then, no. No shame in my game because something and I think we have this as something to talk about in like a podcast. We weren't any worse than your average Japanese person like out on the street. Like when
Yes.
I saw how like the people in Japan get down and how they are like wasted off their ass like on the streets and stuff, I'm like we were experiencing culture. We were just fully immersed in in what's going on in the night scene. Probably could have been like more respectful, in the dorm, but as far as being, like, out and about, I don't think anybody did anything outlandish. We weren't, like, pestering people or flipping cars or some shit. We were just, living life, partying.
Yeah, and I think that's that party aspect is pretty fascinating because it's not like it's just a foreign thing. Like when we
Yeah,
were out in
yeah.
Shibuya, there were tons of people like
Right, right.
drinking out on the streets, like being rowdy. There's sometimes like there's party vans with like blasting, like with
Yeah,
speakers on the top. Um, Not to get pretty
yeah,
hedonistic in any way, but you know, people love to party there, especially Roppongi,
yeah,
Shibuya. Um,
yeah.
I'm more of a Shibuya kind of guy. A
You're
lot of
right.
spots there. Um,
Mhm.
Although there's a lot more trashy places. But I
Those trashy places are are nice though in their own their own little grungy way.
do you remember some of the places?
I can't remember some of the names. There was one place I went with some friends that like got jobs there that I had met before I came to Japan, and it was like one of the types of clubs where it's like you go down like underground, and it was just this tiny little like hole in the wall. And I think I'm pretty sure it was in Shibuya.
Is it Gas
And
Panic?
I think it was.
Yeah, Gas Panic. Yeah,
I
okay.
think it was Gas Panic.
Yeah,
That sounds right. I could be wrong, like, I don't 100% remember, but I at least know that I've been there.
yeah.
But and it was just, like, this red lit, like, little thing, and, like, I don't know. The atmosphere was very, like, I could get drugged here, but
Oh my
it was
god,
fine.
Jesus.
It was fine. It was a fun enough night. Or there's, like, actually, I don't think in Japan I particularly had too many like sketchy uh, when we studied abroad. At least I didn't have too many like sketchy experiences aside from like sometimes when you're waiting at like hachiko, you get like people trying to like pick you up.
Yeah.
But I feel like the bouncers at clubs kind of say a lot about the club that you're going into. Like some of the like bouncers are very like hard, I guess. Like
Wait, what do you mean by hard? Before I misunderstand you,
no, no,
are they just
like,
erect the whole time? They're just like, no,
yeah, they're just standing
you
there
are
like
not
erect.
allowed to come in while this take hard.
No, like hard faced, like hard personality.
Right.
Like they don't make you feel like it feels like you're entering like a fucking like yakuza like gang place. Like you're about to like meet the fucking mafia don or some shit. Then some of those places were kind of iffy. Like maybe there was some things like going on there. People aren't really like dancing and having fun. They're more like sitting around, but not super casually, kind of like, I don't know, they're there for business. I went to one or two places that were kind of like that, where maybe I wasn't supposed to be like drinking there. But for the most part, they're pretty like high energy. Everybody just like having fun, having a good time.
Well, yeah, we're out there to have a good time. Definitely. When I was there's most likely out with the boys, right? Um,
Yeah.
Boys night out most of the time. And
Mm.
we've got a lot of that happening where we would pregame a lot at the dorm in the Sakanae.
Oh yeah.
Then we have a few like concoctions that we have to
Carry along the way.
to do some like strategic drinking so that we would
Yeah.
feel the buzz as soon as we like enter. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I still remember I think I still remember my my concoction. It's like a Grey Goose vodka mini bottle, and then like Monster energy drink or something like that, and then like
Fucking monster.
and then a Midori, like all three of that at the same time, I think, or something like that. And like I mix it all together in that one can, and then I just slowly drink that. And then when I arrive, I'm like, I'm full of energy and I'm a bit buzzed. I'm like, yes, perfect. I don't have to get drinks at the bar. I'm like, oh, great. Um, but yeah, a lot of pregame, and then after that, we just like stumble across Shibuya or Roppongi, most likely
Mhm.
Roppongi for like big nights, right, where we have a bigger
Right,
group,
right.
uh, and that's when we have fun. I noticed this dynamic as well. And I like to compare it actually to like clubbing in Australia and like clubbing in Malaysia,
Mm,
where the number of people actually having fun, when I'm comparing those three, the number of people
mhm.
actually having fun, the ratio, there's more in Japan than in
Yeah,
the other two
yeah,
countries. Um,
absolutely.
like obviously there's gonna be a lot of guys on the hunt. If you
Right.
know what I mean. A lot of guys who are just like preying on people or trying
Mhm.
to pick up girls, basically, right? There's gonna be a lot of that happening. Um, Sometimes you can go into a club where it's the vibe is not that great, like people aren't really dancing, people aren't really going to the floor, etc. And it you can find that everywhere. But I don't think I've
Right.
seen that many times when I was there. um
Mhm.
Whenever I would club in Australia, people don't really dress that much.
Yeah.
In Sydney, um there's a number, well, there's a lot of people who dress really well, but there's actually like a greater number of people who just wear like hoodies and jeans and they just go in. Um, and then they dance, but it's not like it's like a dance to just get closer to people and then like to hook up
Yeah.
with them, right?
Right.
And not to bring down the clubbing scene in Australia, but I didn't really have the best experience
Sometimes
there.
you just wanna have, like, fun with your friends, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a lot of that happening. It was easier to do that in Tokyo,
Mhm.
for sure,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, in Malaysia, yeah, there is, but there's also not that many large clubs. So, and
Mhm.
you gotta take a car to go everywhere. So, like, you're pretty sure you're not gonna be buzzed and like driving a car down highways and shit just to get to the next club. So you gotta be very, very strategic of how you're doing things. But,
Mhm.
how is it different, like
In the
nightlife?
States,
Yeah, yeah, States and Japan.
it's like I have never been, like I'm gonna call it, like, proper clubbing, like, what we did in Tokyo, I'm like, "Damn, this is like going to the club." I've never done that here. Um, I feel more, like, hesitant to, like, go out and party in America just because, like, it's not, like, that safe for females, I feel. I'm a lot more,
Right.
like, hesitant about that. And, like, in the States, especially, like, when you're in college and stuff, everybody's having house parties all the time. Like, in Japan, people don't really, like you don't have people come over, like, your space is, like, quiet. You don't wanna, like, disturb the neighbors. If you live in, like, an apartment, your, like, walls are paper thin, it's like you can't get away with as much stuff. And so it's like you go out. Here, even to, like, the college town that I was in, they had, like, lots of bars, and there, like, of course, were, like, dance floors and stuff like that, but I wouldn't consider any of the places, like, a club, um, but even then, it's just, like, in my experience, guys in America are, like, really aggressive, and so it's like you can't just go out and, like, have fun with your friends without there being, like, an issue. And, like, in Japan, if someone were to, like, approach me to, like, dance with me or hit on me or something, I could easily be like, "Oh, I'm not interested, I'm here with my friends," and they, like, very quickly are like, "Oh, okay," like, respect and, like, walk away. Whereas, like, in the States, someone will just, like, approach you and try to, like, put their hands on you and stuff, and you're like, "Hey, no, I'm not into that," and they're like, "Fuck you, bitch." And you're like, "Oh, like, oh, okay, okay." And so, like, here, I don't really I don't really do all that, but from, like, some stories, it's kind of like you said, like, in Australia, like, people mostly just kinda, like, grind up on each other, like, usually if you, like, go out, you're probably looking for someone to, like, go home with and have a regrettable sexual encounter. Like, no judgment, but, like, that's typically, like, why people go out, I feel here. They're just looking for a little something extra.
A little something, something, going back to
A little
bed, but
something something.
but somebody
Yeah.
else's bed. In Japan, they call it this is gonna be pretty degrading, but in Japan they call it omochikaeri, which is
Yeah,
yeah,
like takeout.
yeah. So
Yeah.
mochikaeri is takeaway, right? So for
Mhm.
if you're a little primer in Japanese, to take away, you know, take away for food, take away some gyudon at like Yoshi or Yoshinoya or something like that. When you add
Yeah.
the o at the end is some kind of like a respect prefix onto the word, but it just
You're a
still sounds
whore,
degrading.
respectfully.
It's
Yeah.
it's degrading. Like I'm calling you takeaway because I want to take you home and fuck you. Like that's what that's
Yeah.
saying, right? So
Yeah.
it's pretty bad slang.
I remember I remember learning that word and then like in my mind just thinking it was so funny like coming home from like a night out or something and like going to like fucking McDonald's or some shit and being like what's you guys eat? Like yeah.
it's just a guy at the counter. I want to take you home. Damn.
This poor service worker.
I feel bad for them sometimes because the ones who work fast food at like the nightlife places
Mm,
had to deal with like the worst people ever. Like all the rubbish, all the drunk
yeah.
people, all the ones coming out of clubs, etc. They just look so trashy after. I mean, that's a pretty
And
global thing.
ragged.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
or, or, and I noticed this very, very unique to Japan. You can sleep anywhere, no one will bother you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like you can like sleep at like Wendy's in Roppongi, no one's gonna
Mhm,
bother you, or
mhm.
Macca's, or if you're
Just out on the street. Yeah.
or just out on the street, or if you're full ghetto, pay for like a overnight or a 24-hour karaoke room
Oh,
and
yeah.
then sleep. Because I've done that. Like that's
Yeah.
fun. Um, and it's like what 400, 600 yen
Yeah,
just
it's
to
super
sleep on the
cheap.
bench. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, take a quick nap.
yeah. There's something interesting about that because for some reason Japan expects people to want to sing all night until whatever the hell a.m. in the morning.
You gotta get those feelings out somehow. Like, all that all that repressed
Yeah, but have you ever
emotion.
have you ever sung until like 7 a.m. before? I've never done that before until I came to Tokyo. It's pretty fascinating.
I don't well, again, like, kind of, because, like, in the States, it's, like, house parties and stuff,
Yeah,
and typically at least, like, the friends that I made before I came to Japan, it's, like, the parties that we would have, it's just, like, music and stuff going, everybody's just, like, dancing and having fun, so kind of, yeah, actually. Like, a karaoke room is kind of like making your own club room, like, if you go out with friends.
yeah, true.
There were, like I'm more, like it's, kind of funny to say in, like, these conversations, but, like, I'm more, like, shy, and so, like, I was always, like, hesitant to go to, like, karaoke because I don't wanna, like, sing in front of people, but there were times when I would go with, like, Micah or something, if we, like, missed last train and we're like, "Oh, we might as well drink the rest of the night then," and, like, we don't wanna, like, go to a club, so you just go to, like, a, like, karaoke room or something, or if, like, you don't wanna stay in the club until the first train comes, like, friends and I have gone to, like, kill a couple hours and then just end up having fun and, like, staying longer.
Ah, yes, the first train. The Japanese sunrise is basically hearing that
Ding, ding. Yeah, yeah. I remember being because at a Sakadai, my room, is like right above like the entrance. And so it's like right there, like by the station. Like
Yeah.
the tracks are like right across the street from me. So I remember sometimes just like laying in bed, like insomnia, and then suddenly you hear the like ding ding ding. Nice little like a Sakadai like jingle, and I'm like, oh fuck. Like it's morning.
Yeah, it did not help that our dorm was right next to a train station.
Mhm.
That being said, my room was on the other side, so I didn't hear it that much. So I was
Yeah.
lucky. But I know just from hanging out in people's places and like, your room as well, everyone on the front facing part of the dorm
Yeah.
will just hear that all the time. And at first, there's a great aesthetic to it because you'll see the train tracks, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
But then after a while, you're like, it's getting annoying. Like, God damn it, I
I
want to
was
sleep. Like,
actually Yeah, I was actually surprised though, like, it didn't bother me nearly as much as I thought it would. The only time I ever really noticed it is if I was filming, like, YouTube videos, and then, like, every fucking 5 minutes, it's like, and I'm like, "Fuck." It makes for an easy commute home, though.
yeah. Because it's just one train ride away.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of conveniences. That's what I loved about being a student there for sure. Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just, there's the Suica, and then you just pay for the trip, like one off, and then
Mhm.
you just get it like unlimited. And anything extra is basically a train ride to elsewhere in Tokyo. So
Mhm.
you save a lot of money from there because if you're going to be taking the train every
Yeah.
single time, um, and I had to get used to the routine of uh, a uni student in Tokyo when you have morning classes,
Oh
which is pretty
god,
crap
yeah.
because you're just like salmoning up all together, all these people put into like one train. Um, and Tobutojo is infamous for having that. So a lot of people
Yeah.
be going like earlier or like even way later,
Yeah.
but almost always never way later just because you're just stuck. And sometimes you can't even go into the train. That's how many
Mhm.
people are like taking a line to go into uh, Tokyo prefecture to actually like work. So a lot of people will
Yeah.
come in from the Saitama prefecture, and then there's just this one line Tobutojo that will just collect all
Mhm.
these people, and then they just reach there, which
Mhm.
is which is which is nice and all, but you know, for the
But
suicide line, you're gonna have a lot of people there, and it's sometimes it does not even work.
yeah, so often. Because I remember there's some like, one of the things that I had to get used to as, like, a student is that, like, there's no excuses. Like, there
Yes.
are, like, no excuses in Japan, and I remember typically I would go, like, to campus pretty early, as you said, to, like, avoid the, like, fucking rush hour of
Yeah.
the morning commute. Like, there would be times where it would be so packed in there, like, my feet literally would be, like, off the floor. I'd be, like, pressed so tightly, I'm, like, starting to rise, and, like, I get anxious, so I was like, "I can't deal with that." So I would go to campus sometimes really early and just, like, sit there and have, like, breakfast and watch the janitors, like, do their thing. But, oh, I forgot where I was even going with this. Oh, yeah, no excuses. There was a time fucking bless Anna, fucking Anna.
Shout outs to
We
Anna.
were, like, I think it was the first, like, snow that Tokyo had when I was there, and so the the Tobotojo line, like, was delayed, and Anna and I ended up, like, running into each other, and she was, like, freaking out because we had, like, a quiz, I think, and Anna's always, like, "Oh, fuck." Like, she's very studious, like, she takes school and her grades and things, like, very seriously.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Don't worry, like, we'll get there." And we ended up being, I think, like, only a couple minutes late. I think, like, the, like, start bell had, like, just finished, like, ringing by the time we got to class. Our teacher had already handed out, like, the quizzes, and so she didn't give one to me and Anna, and I'm like, "Whatever," like, I don't I don't really give a fuck. I was just like, "Start the day." But Anna was, like, upset. Like, Anna wants, like, her good grades, she wants to test her knowledge, she want like, she wants this. So, like, at the end of class, Anna was like, "Are you gonna let us take the quiz?" And the teacher's like, "No, you were late." And Anna's like, "That's not our fault, like, our train, like, was not working." And in Japan, they're just like, "Ah, you should have thought about that. Like, you should have been prepared for, like, something bad to happen. Like, poor you." And I think this had happened a couple times with Anna and I specifically, where the train had been delayed for like whatever reasons. And so we had come in like late before. And so the teacher's like, "You've been late before." And Anna was like grilling this teacher. She ended up getting to take the quiz, so like good for her. But that was something that I was like appalled by, because like here, if you're like, if something happens, you're like, "Oh, my like tire, like I got a flat," or like traffic or something. Teachers are still pretty much like, "Oh yeah, yeah, like it happens." But in Japan, there's like no excuse that you could say for them to be like, "Oh, this is fine." Like it's understandable. It's like everything is your own responsibility, even things that are out of your control.
I got shanked and put into hospital. Well, you should have thought about that, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, there was a time, was this? No, yeah, it was first semester. Um, one of my friends from back home had passed away in like a car accident, and I was like, "Oh fuck." And I had like just found out, there's like the time difference and stuff. So right when I woke up in the morning, I had like messages from people about like our friend that had passed away, and I was like, "Fuck." And I didn't really know like what to do. I was like, "Oh, I gotta go to class." And usually when I'm like high strung up in emotion, I like overshare. So I like brought the teacher like outside, and like I'm obviously like crying and stuff. And I was telling her like, my friend just passed away. Um, I know it's important to come to class, so like I came, but like I would appreciate it if I could like not participate today, if I could just listen to the lesson and not, because this is Japanese class, so you have to like talk and practice and do things. And she was like, "Yeah, okay." The fucking irony of the universe. I go into class and I like open up to like see what we're doing today, and sure fucking enough, like all of our vocab is like car accident, death, like
Oh my
victim.
God.
And so I'm just sitting here in class like, and this, I don't want to call her a bitch, but those are my feelings at the time. Like this bitch straight up like, as soon as class starts, is like, "Holly, will you read the like da da da?" And like no joke, I just like closed my book and like left class that day. I was like, "No, not today." And so that was so like, I'm sure we'll talk about like culture shock and stuff, but like that was like mind blowing to me. Like that concept of just like no excuses, like nothing, like there's just nothing you can say. Like your responsibility is your responsibility, like regardless of what's going on. And that was something that I could not and probably could never like deal with, like as far as how I conduct myself in life goes.
It's like a duty, right? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind of, I don't want to say militaristic, but I I had that a few times with specific teachers where a little bit late and then I got points deducted. But I ended up participating just as much as everybody else. So I
Yeah.
was like, interesting. It's like rules that they must adhere to. If the
Yeah.
students are not there before, say 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever time it
Mhm.
is, then they don't count. Like it's as if they don't
Mhm.
exist. Like on documenting
Yeah.
when you document the whole thing,
You're
right?
right. Yeah.
It was worse when you have two campuses to go to. So like
Yeah.
for context, like Rikyo University has two campuses, one in Ikebukuro, which is in Tokyo area, and then one in Niza, which is out in Saitama as well. So from Asakare dorm, if you take the Tobu Tojo line and you take the train uh inward, then that's to Ikebukuro campus, and then you take the train outward, then that's to Niza. I have classes between those two campuses on the same day. So like there's like this buffer where I must quickly go to the train and then like get to the next one, which is so stupid. Um, and there were times when I couldn't get to Nisa campus in time, or I get lost, or whatever it is, and I would I just lost points for lack of participation, even though I
Mhm.
was there like 2 minutes later and I was handing in my work, I was talking and all that at the same time. So it was kind of interesting. Like, of course, I didn't like it at first, and of course, I was like, hello, sensei, I'm here, bro." I mean, I didn't actually say bro. It'd be funny if I did, but like,
Right.
but it was it was fascinating to me the way that they taught, maybe specifically the Japanese language to students
Yeah.
here. Maybe that's why the way that they taught the language required that strict acumen when it came
Yeah.
to teaching
Yeah.
it. Because yes, when it's strict to things like punctuality,
Mhm.
sometimes there's some friction when it comes to things that you cannot control, right? Like the
Right.
train breaking down, or
Mhm.
or I'm just gonna say it up front, someone killed themselves on the train line and then had to clean it up,
Right. Yeah.
right? That has
Yeah.
happened multiple times. Multiple
Yep.
times. And but it was also because of that strict acumen that I actually learned Japanese very, very well,
Mm.
because they enforce you to learn this much by this week. It's almost like a huge like huge level of accountability. And that shot up from my first semester to second semester when I skipped a grade in Japanese language ability, which meant that the
Mhm.
amount of homework that came up was just like, it just exponentially increased. Like, it exploded the amount of work that I had to do.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I guess you see me in like the in McKim Hall, which is, for our listeners, the International Students Study Lounge, or like the International Student Hall. I think that's the name of it. Like, it's just like the
Yeah.
lounge. It's the lounge for the gaijins, right? It's just like the gaijin
Yeah. Yeah.
cage,
Right.
right? It's just where we hang
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, if you want to find white people, you go here, right? It's just like that.
Yeah.
You just
Right.
go to
Right.
the second floor, and then there's people with like computers and tables and whatever. Um, yeah. So there are times where you'd find me there, but I'm in the corner because I have so much homework to do, and it's just all
Mhm.
Japanese language. But I have them to thank for that, because that actually helped a lot.
I wish I would have taken school more seriously when I was there. I feel like most of the like Japanese that I picked up was more from like going out and
Yeah.
like more so just being like immersed in in the language, like seeing it everywhere and stuff like that. Like now that I'm back in America, it's kind of like shitty. Like the past couple years, like my Japanese has just completely like fucking dwindled down. I can't even look at kanji anymore. I need to start studying again. But also, like you said, like the teaching styles are so different. And maybe it's just because like my brain works differently. I had a hard time like switching to that because like in the states how they approached like our like language, we did most of the work like outside of class, like by ourselves when it came to like memorizing things and doing worksheets and stuff like that. And then we would like come to class and kind of have like dialogues and converse with each other. And then I think it was easier because it was like all your friends. So like if you made like a mistake and stuff, you like don't like care so much. But in the classes that I was taking for like Japanese language, it was like super like strict. Like
Right.
it felt, and it probably mostly just because of like my personality. I don't like to like make mistakes in front of people and stuff. But it felt like so like rigid that like if you didn't know what you were doing, like at least for me personally, like I felt like stupid. And so the style of teaching, I didn't like it that much. And plus the one downside that I had with like the Rikyo language classes specifically compared to like places that my friends went was that they didn't, at least in my levels, like make us do kanji. It was like optional. It was like, here's like a kanji packet if you want to like take a quiz about it, like every couple weeks, I think. It's like you could do that. in class we didn't actually like learn kanji and like practice it and study it. That it was just like left to our own devices to figure out.
Wait. So to clarify, you didn't learn kanji in Rikyo, or was this in the States?
In at Rikyo, they didn't
Ah,
teach us
okay.
kanji in like my classes. It
Is
was like
this
an optional.
is this like J2 or like J3 or
What did I think? I think I was
J1S or something like that?
3. I think I was in 3.
Okay. All right. Oh,
3.
interesting.
Either 2, maybe 2S.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
I
because
can't remember.
I was in J3S,
Yeah, I
and
think
we were
I
doing kanji already. So yeah.
yeah, we like they expected that we like knew it.
Yeah.
So I think I was 2S when I came in, and then I think I was in just J3 normal my second semester.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was more or less like fine because I'd been introduced to like kanji and stuff like in the States, and at least in the like basic ones it's like I can more or less like recognize and figure out. But I learned a lot just on the streets with like kanji though, because it's like everywhere, and I'm like, fuck yeah, that says dentist office. Like you don't really realize you're learning until like you're like, oh yeah, like I can read that. Or like you hear like on the train or in stores, you hear like the same stuff like over and over again. And then suddenly one day you're just like, oh, I know what they're saying. I feel like that's more so like how it went for me. I didn't take my studies like nearly as seriously like as I should have. Oops.
Yeah, it was that context, right? Like you're in
Mhm.
a mood to learn something when you're in that class. But then
Mhm.
when you're not, you're just existing, right? Living as you're
Yeah,
walking about the
yeah.
city by osmosis. If I want to get from point A to point B, I'll have to notice and observe like these kanjis at
Yeah.
work, right? Or like people talking
Yeah.
to you, especially like the like service workers who are speaking in a very formal tone, or
Oh,
they
yeah.
say the same few regular patterns. You would notice what they say, and you notice like you know how to respond, right? So you know how to like
Mhm.
act. Uh, and
Mhm.
and in this case, every person that you observe around you in Tokyo is a teacher and teaching you how to be
Yeah.
Japanese. Like not to speak
Right.
Japanese, but also to like just be a Japanese person.
Yeah.
So that was, it really, really helped. When yeah, when I came in. So like for our listeners, um, in terms of to describe the language level system within Rikyo, I'm not sure how it is for other universities. The beginner level is J1, J2, J3, and then there's an S version of each one, and the S stands for special. And I'll explain why in a bit. Intermediate is J4, J5. Uh, yeah, J4, J5, and then advanced is J6, J7, and I think there's a J8. I think, but I think J7 is like pretty much up there already. So S and J1, 2, 3, S is special because what it does is that it's like an advanced version of that same level, because at the end of the semester, if you are staying on for another semester, you can take a language proficiency test within the system, and if your score high enough, you can actually skip a grade. So in my case, I was J3S. I was in the highest beginner level grade, and I was like, I wasn't a beginner. I did 2 years of Japanese in Australia. Oh, I was a fucking beginner. Like it was
Yeah,
intense.
yeah.
Like that's not.
Let's come back to that because I
Yeah,
was gonna ask you. I
yeah,
was gonna
yeah,
ask you about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So J3S, and I was put in beginner class, and I did well, and I did the proficiency test before semester 2 started, and then my teacher congratulated me. She said that like, oh, I skipped a grade, so I did not do J4. I went straight to J5. And so I got thrown into the world of intermediate Japanese, and
To the
oh
wolves.
goddamn,
Yeah.
that's like literally throwing me off a cliff. Like that's a monster
Mhm.
shit right there. But yeah, sorry, yeah, what were you gonna ask?
Yeah, I was gonna ask because I feel it's so interesting to just like observe the person that I was back then. I feel like I was living my life by like my ego. And so when I came to Japan after like studying, I did I think it was like the equivalent of like 2 years of study of Japanese as far as the classes that I had taken by the time I came to Japan. And in America, it's like as far as class was going, like I was getting A's, like I didn't find it like particularly like soul crushing or anything because everyone's like, "Oh, Japanese is the hardest language to learn." And I didn't like feel that way. So I came to Japan with this like misplaced confidence that like everything was going to be fine. And I remember, I think the first person that I talked to in Japanese was fucking Nobu. And he was
Ah,
like smoking a cigarette outside. And I was like on my balcony and I was like, oh my God, what's up? Like for some reason, like talking, I was like, I'm going to use Japanese now. And he comes from, where was he? Oh, like from Osaka. So he's got like a fucking totally different dialect
dialect.
than the
Yeah.
people in Tokyo. And if you're studying like Japanese in school, you're typically learning like the like Tokyo like dialect, the like super standard like Japanese. And so this kid is talking to me and the first conversation we had was like fairly like polite because it's like introduction. But then after I talked to him like the second time, seeing him like in the lobby, he was just like full out like fucking Kansai Ben. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know Japanese. What the fuck? It, like, is this guy saying? Like, holy fuck. And it wasn't until I think like a couple weeks later that Anna was like, "Oh yeah, Nobu speaks with like Osaka Ben," and I was like, "Is that why I can't understand anything this fucking guy says?" Like, and eventually, like more or less, like you can learn like the differences, but no. And then I learned very quickly that what I was learning in school was like fucking tourist like 101, like how to live and survive in Japan. I can go to the grocery store and but then like as far as like actually talking to people and having like meaningful conversations, I was like I didn't know how to do like any of that because again like I like to talk about like deep stuff. And then like all I could do in Japanese was like an introduction and some like this food sure is great. Like and so I remember getting like frustrated and like what's the word? Kind of like demotivated, like unmotivated to like study because I had thought like I was at this level and then very quickly I was humbled like, oh shit. Which is the one thing that I did like about the Japanese classes is like as you said, like the teachers they're like teaching it how you would learn your own native language like in your own country.
Yeah.
Like they teach you like you are like a Japanese student learning the Japanese language, like the grammar points, the like this is the different like a hierarchy of like oh if you're talking to your boss, if you're talking to like a friend, if you're talking to a child, like you learn like all the ins and outs. Whereas when I was learning it in the States, they're just like, "Ah, yeah, this is just how are you? Like Genki desu ka? And like
Oh God.
that manga I was reading like sure was great. Like so
That
how was it
anime
for like
dough.
you? Yeah, like the classes that you were taking at like your home uni versus like how you felt about your Japanese when you came to Japan.
Yeah, and I want to hear your take on this too. I well, it wasn't hard in
Mhm.
Australia. Um, I don't know, like for example, if I took beginner Japanese 1 and 2 and then like intermediate 1 and 2 or something like that, like something equivalent
Yeah,
like
it
that
was the same for me. Yeah.
in 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 University of New South Wales. Shout out to everybody, Black and Yellow, UNSW. And you know, in beginners Japanese 1, you try your best to blaze through the hiragana and katakana really, really quickly,
Right.
um, in like 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and and you listen to, so you hear all the sentences in Romaji, which is like
Mhm.
basically romanized syllables that represent those
Mhm.
characters, and then slowly we transpose it into actual like hiragana being used
Yep.
to all of that. And I think we didn't really learn kanji until like the second course. And then from there we had like intermediate and then intermediate 2. So they dripped the amount of kanji slowly over time by
Mhm.
like the second course that I took in. So that's like, basically we didn't touch kanji until like 8 months into me learning Japanese.
Mm.
Um, I have a feeling I could have, like, I mean, it was at the pace for everybody for that course, and I just wanted to pass through my degree, right? So I just like ended
Right.
up like just following that speed. I felt like I could have gotten faster myself, but I wasn't really. Um, I think I was just fascinated just by just writing hiragana, katakana, or like trying to understand the mindset. The thing is, it's pretty hard, especially because we're lacking that context, that environment where
Right.
we're not walking through Tokyo, right? We're like, I
Mhm.
was in Australia, right? People were like,
Right,
"Oh,
right.
fucking sitting on a fucking bar," right? Like you
Yeah.
hear Japanese and like, have you heard an Australian person speak Japanese? Like it's kind of funny, right? Fucking genki
Mm.
desu ka, right?
Yeah, right. Right, right.
Orega beer nomitai, right? Fucking bar, right? Like it's
Yeah.
nomihodai, right? It's pretty bad, right?
Right.
Okay, it's just basically the pronunciation isn't exactly the best, right? And as much as
Yeah.
I appreciate our teachers back then, we had to default the speed had to default to a pace where everybody could follow. So
Right.
by the time I reached intermediate 2, then I came to Japan. So that was interesting because I was like, okay, we're getting a few sentences of homework per week. I learned like 2 to 3 kanjis or something like that, like every
Mm,
week or
right,
something
right.
like that. And then I go to Japan, and then we did the proficiency test. And I don't know how yours went, but mine was there were 2 parts, and then there's like a comprehension one, and then there's like a
Mhm.
and then there's like a essay uh
Yeah.
part. And and I remember that I messed up mine really, really badly because the topic was about shakaijin, which is like people living in society, or like shakai, like society. And
Mm.
then I thought I read the kanji the other way around, so I thought it was kaisha, which is basically company. So I thought the
Oh,
essay was
yeah.
about like, oh, what would a Japanese company be like? And I'm like, oh, okay, I can write about that. And then I read it, and then by the time I reached the end, I'm like, oh fuck, I wrote something completely different. But yeah, I got into J3S, and the workload for J3S was like 10 to 15 kanjis a week with the optional kanji sheet that you can do
Mm,
for the
yeah.
kanji tests, which I think
Mhm.
was what you were talking about as well.
Yeah.
Um, and there was absolutely no Romaji, no English letters whatsoever. Everyone was speaking
Yeah.
Japanese
Yeah.
only, which is perfect because you can't run away. You can
Right.
only speak
Gotta
Japanese.
face those demons, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta confront. Like, don't be a bitch. Speak Japanese, right? So like,
Mhm.
I got thrown into the deep end for that because I went from intermediate 2 to like, you're gonna be a functioning member of society in like 2 weeks, and you're
Right,
gonna learn all
right.
this kanji really quickly. And I'm like, oh my god! And I remember having to adapt to that. I was suffering for like the first month, um, and I don't know how many people were in your class, and for J3S, it was just me and
Mm.
Yasin. So it was
Oh,
just the
shit.
2 of us and then the teacher.
Yeah.
Uh, so we kept each other accountable pretty well. We were
Yeah.
like, if you fuck up, I will fuck up as well. So it
Right,
was
right.
pretty intense. And I gotta say, like, there's a huge workload as well, but I think the way that they do it is, especially when you're in S class, the amount of workload they give you means that they trust your ability to actually cope with that amount of workload. So
Yeah.
I actually did appreciate the amount of that because in the end I was quite studious and wanting to like cover up and actually finish all the work that way.
Ugh. See, I'm like that. I'm like easily overwhelmed. That's a trust maybe they shouldn't have trusted me with. Like, and again, it comes back to like the differences in like communication because where like as my like professors and stuff here in the States, I can be like, hey, feeling a little suicidal this week. Can I turn my assignments in on Friday? And they're like, oh, absolutely, take care of yourself. Whereas in Japan, it's almost for me, at least with how like my mind works, it was almost like a sad sense of like I'm a failure and I'm always going to be a failure because I can't perform, I suppose, like
Right.
how the society there wants you to. But yeah, I had like watching like you and Anna, and then what was her name? I think when you jumped up, maybe you worked a lot with her, Kristen or Kirsten.
Oh, Kirsten. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kirsten.
Kirsten. She was
Yeah.
fucking like that certain group that was like super studious. Like
Yeah.
I would just like watch them in awe, like in McKim, like circle up with their little like Denshi G shows and like do their work and stuff. I was like, oh, why can't that be me?
Drinking your strong zero. Why can't that? Why,
The
why
strong
can't that
zero
be?
hit it in McKim, like it was all right. Like like obviously I did well enough. Like I do like to give myself credit because we did have to take like seminar classes,
Yep.
and as like bad as I feel my Japanese like was and is, I still made it through my seminars where they only talk in Japanese. You do all your work in Japanese, like you have to do presentations. And I made it through, so like obviously I was probably doing better than like I thought that I was doing. But yeah, as far as my like speaking ability went, actually going to Japan like shattered my soul like as a person because it was similar to you how they did things here in the States as far as like how they structured it. But it was even easier for me because I was studying like biological sciences before I decided I was going to switch into like the humanities. And so I was finishing a semester. Like I was actually supposed to be like graduating like when I switched into like studying Japanese and like international business and stuff. Um, so I was like finishing the semester and I was like, well, I know I'm gonna in the fall I'm gonna start studying Japanese, so I'll just start studying it now. So over the summer, I taught myself like hiragana and katakana, and we used the fucking like Genki books in my classes. Um, so I worked through like the first Genki book like all by myself like over the summer. And so when I actually started classes, I was like ahead of everyone and I felt like so cool because I was like I know everything. Um and then it was the same for you. There was like the two like beginner courses, and then before the summer before I came to Japan, I did the two like intermediate ones. And then the intermediate ones were like a little more difficult like once you start getting into like the specifics of like grammar and stuff like that. Um but it wasn't, at least how they were like teaching it, like it wasn't like so like daunting. Like, and then if you make mistakes, this is also like a difference in grading in America versus like Japan, where if you made mistakes in my Japanese classes, but they kind of knew what you were getting at, it was like you would still get kind of like partial points and they like correct it and they're like, okay, yeah, this is like, you know, you were on the right track. But whereas in Japan, like if they notice like your stroke order is wrong or you forget like the 10-10 to like obviously you knew that it was like de instead of te, but you just forgot to put on those like 10-10. It's like, nope, fuck you, the whole thing's wrong, like you failed. Like yeah, like you were saying earlier, almost is like a fucking military experience for for the Japanese language.
Yeah, and that in itself is the culture shock, I think.
Yeah.
But it's a great gateway to, like, that is the anchor or the reason in which we get the chance to
Mm,
go to Tokyo and be like, okay, I'm in a foreign
challenge
place.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what can I do? Like, how can I prove myself? Or, and like, I forgot how the quote goes. It's like, a person knows themselves best when they're in the midst of peril, right? Like you'll
Mhm.
know your true character once problems surface up or like issues come up. It
Mm.
was a great chance because I noticed this, and I think we can probably talk about this in another time, especially on culture shocks. But
Mhm.
pretty much in a nutshell, when you're studying or you're going exchange as a foreign student into Japan, you'll be put into two categories of people because people
Mhm.
would know that you're foreign. So they know that
Mhm.
you won't know to the full extent of their values, their tendencies, the nuances, the implicit meanings in different conversations, why people bow, why people don't make eye contact, why people have different honorifics, etc. You'll be put in two categories because you will be, to a certain extent, isolated from society
Mhm.
to not disrupt the harmony within there. The
Mhm.
first category is if you are not isolated to a certain extent, or if you are, and you're not, you know, people know that you're foreign, you may feel sad or lonely because you're not part of that collective, right? There's this
Mhm.
community that you live in, but you're not belonging to. So a lot of
Yeah.
people who thrive in the safety and the stability of a community that they belong to, if they're missing that when they're in a different country, especially when it's a country that don't speak in the same language as them, then
Right.
that's gonna be hard on the mind, right? That's gonna be really, really
Mhm.
hard on the mind.
Mhm.
But then on the other side, you have if you're a foreigner and they know that you are, so they isolate you from their harmony, then to a certain extent, you are free from rules, free from temptation.
Right.
Of course, you're not gonna be committing crimes, but like you,
I mean, you hope
I
you
mean,
hope that people aren't.
yeah, you're not gonna abuse that behavior. But like, um, maybe a more accurate way of saying this is people forgive you for not following the rules to a certain extent,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's it's interesting, especially when you start speaking in English first. I
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
many experiences in Japan where it is just much more convenient that I speak to someone in English rather than Japanese,
Yeah.
just because I need to let them know that I'm foreign. And
Right.
this is not coming from like a very privileged position in any way. This is
Yeah.
more like, let's set the basis for understanding. First of all,
Right.
I'm a foreigner, so I may not understand you completely, all of the
Mhm.
behaviors that should normally be present in a Japanese
Right.
language conversation, because I'll just be like, "Hey, how's it going? Konnichiwa, mate." Right? Like that would be pretty bad.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Um,
Right.
and so I would start off by speaking English sometimes, and people would be like, "Oh, sorry, we don't speak. My English is not good." And I'm like,
Yeah.
じゃあ日本語で喋るか. Yeah, like yeah, I'll just switch completely.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Right.
but I have to let them know, like, oh, before I talk to you, before we can communicate, I'm foreign. Because there is that
Right.
ingrained understanding. It's like,
Right.
oh, like people are designed to treat you different if they know you are different. And I think that kind of
Yeah.
tendency is more common when you're studying there. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You just made me think of like there are the people though that like have no reservation. I remember meeting Misa,
Mm,
and I met her through one of our like business classes and got put into like a group with her and some other kids. And it was like the class was in English and stuff, so our teacher like gave all the token like English native speakers, like each Japanese group had one. And um yeah. So I was with
we
them.
want tokens.
Yeah. And then so I was with them and they were like, uh, our English isn't that great. And I'm like, Japanese isn't that great. And they're like, we'll do the work and you just tell us like if the English is okay. And I was like, no, like I don't feel comfortable with that. Like what let's figure it out. But then like Misa, she was like, we're gonna make you speak Japanese. And I was like, fuck. And so like every time like we would go and like have our meetings, she'd be like, for the first 30 minutes, we're only speaking Japanese. And then the last 30 minutes we'll speak English. I was like, fuck. Like fuck. And we became like really good friends, but she was like, you're here to learn, so I'm gonna make sure that you learn. And I was like, fuck. Whereas everyone else, it was kind of like similar where I feel um it doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers like lots of foreigners where it's like if they find out that you're not like a native Japanese speaker, they kind of like baby you a little bit, like in a
Yeah,
sense. So they're
yeah,
kind of like, ah, precious foreigner, you don't know anything.
yeah.
Um, that was most of my experience with most people like that I would meet where they were like, ah, you don't speak Japanese, that's like fine. Like even if they couldn't really speak English, like they would still like really come down to my level and not really like try to challenge me, probably because they, you know, they want to be polite and they don't want to make me feel like uncomfortable. But I did really value the people that were like, no, like you're here to learn, so like I'm gonna force you to learn.
Misa is quite the outlier, though. And for context,
Yeah,
Misa is a good friend. Misa is a good friend of
yeah.
ours. She does not act like the does not have the noted Japanese behaviors that we were talking about
Yeah,
before.
she is a completely, she is her own person.
Yeah,
She's
very
Misa.
comfortable in her own
Yeah,
skin, right?
yeah.
The confidence
I
level
loved
is
her.
pretty high. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
she's great.
she's one of my favorite people that I have met in this existence.
I did I ever tell you how I met her?
No.
No. Okay, so this is in my second semester or your first semester,
Mhm.
and I was with the 1050, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
So for context, we have Team SMESH, which is the boys from semester one, and in semester two we have the 1050, which is the boys from semester two. And so I was with the boys. I was with Eric specifically. Shout outs to Eric. I
Oh
miss your
no.
voice, and I miss your funny laugh. Anyway, I was on my way in the Ikebukuro campus on the way to McKim, and I think I had a class in Niza, so I had to take the train and I go to the campus. So I was alone, and I was on my way to McKim because I wanted to I think do some homework or something like that. I remember grabbing a snack and being like, okay, maybe like an onigiri. Then just go to a kombini, and then get like a royal milk tea and rice ball. Then
Oh,
go to the
I miss
ikebukuro.
those.
I miss that so much. Like
Yeah.
we could talk about like dedicate a
Yeah, yeah,
whole
yeah,
episode to just
yeah.
convenience stores
Just
because I love it.
food. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, walk into the campus and I walk into McKim. Um, and there was someone in front of me that walked into McKim at the same time, and I was like, oh well, she looks pretty hot, and she was she was in front of me.
With
I haven't
those skirts.
I haven't
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't I haven't I haven't seen how she looks like. She was just from the back. I was like, she was pretty hot. And then she went up the stairs as well, and I went up the stairs, and she turned into the McKim lounge, and I was like, oh, she's here as well. And then she turned and she sat down, and I was like, well, she's pretty hot. And then Eric comes in, one of the guys from like downstairs or upstairs or something like that, passes by her, and he's like, "Oh, hi, Misa," and she says hi back or whatever. And then Eric's goddamn face uh, looks at me, catches me looking at her from far away, and he has this face that he does where like and the best way to describe it, if you haven't met this guy before, do you know like the Nutcracker? He has this like smile that's just covering the
Yeah,
entirety of his
yeah.
face, and like imagine the Nutcracker but Danish, and he
And horny.
and horny, and he
Yeah.
just has this big smile. He's just like, I know what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and that's how low his voice is. He's like, right? So,
Yeah. It is.
oh, oh, I know who you're looking at, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so he catches me looking at her, and he's like, oh, you know Misa? I'm like, oh, is that her name? And then he's like, yeah, that's her name. What do you want to get to know her? I'm like, you want to introduce me? And then it turns out that she was like talking with like all the other international students. So I was like, I got an in. I mean, it should be fine. It should be an easy introduction. And then I got to talk to her after that. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool because the serendipity behind the number of students who would actually go out of their way to talk to the international
Mhm.
students. Because note, we do have a number of international students, but it's still a mainly Japanese university. And also,
Mhm.
there's only a few courses that are available for international students to join in because a lot of them
Right.
are Japanese only. So you have to have a Japanese language requirement, or the courses that are in English language are very, very basic or like beginner level.
Right.
Um, and also, and also they have to do that because they have to accommodate for the English language abilities for a lot of students. And even
Yeah.
then, when you're in a class like that, the number of people who are too shy to speak English, they
Yeah.
make up the
Yeah.
majority, right? So, you know, Misa being an outlier is quite true here. So yeah, that,
Yeah.
that was
I
that was
think
pretty interesting.
we were pretty, I don't think we said this in the beginning, but we were pretty kind of fortunate because like Odikyo itself is kind of like more of the more like prestigious like business schools.
Yeah.
So they're fairly like known for their like business program. So there's quite a chunk of like the student body that um they become a little more like proficient in English because their goal is to go on and do things like in international business and stuff like that. Um, so a lot of like our friends that and even just random people that I met, like they put in so much effort to be able to talk to people like in English, which I thought was pretty cool. When I was coming to Japan, Tokyo, you find English pretty much everywhere, but when I was coming to Japan, I didn't think that. I thought like I wasn't going to encounter that much English. So, I was I was surprised quite a bit when I came to school, and there were so many people that were willing to talk with me in English, even if they were like shy about it,
Yeah.
which motivated me more too to want to like meet them in the middle and try harder with like Japanese as well because I'm like, oh, they're trying so hard to talk to me in my language. I should put in that same effort to try to, make conversation easier for them too.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing about it is that you meet those people quite commonly, especially in that uni,
Mhm.
a lot of other
Mhm.
unis as well. Um, it it's more on the shyness of it, the shame or
Yeah.
the embarrassment behind not being able to articulate yourself too well, maybe because of confidence levels in English or whatever it could be. Um,
Mhm.
because I noticed this in a lot of students actually, and I could probably talk about another story where I taught English to students in high school, like
Yeah, yeah.
in the summer or like in semester one. But when we have a foreign student who would speak Japanese or try to speak Japanese, we don't mind making mistakes
Right.
because we understand and accept that we're not native speakers. So when we say something, maybe it's like a minor mistake or whatever, or maybe it's like a completely wrong mistake, or we forget a word, right? We're like, oh, what's the
Mhm.
word for fridge? It's like, oh, can I take bread from the fridge or something like that?
Mhm.
It's okay from two fronts. One is we know that we're going to make mistakes, so we just embrace that. And two is we know that Japanese people that we talk to, especially friends, forgive us for making mistakes because
Right.
as mentioned before, it is quite a hard language to learn because of all these nuances, especially like
Mhm.
what is not being said is also being said in the Japanese conversation.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
people don't really realize that, like, but then we're like, hey, anime, manga, right? Like that's all that matters for some
Right,
reason, right?
right,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
kind of it's kind of strange, right? Uh yeah, and on the other hand, if you replace those elements with a Japanese student speaking English, you would think that those two tendencies will pop up. But then the third one
Mhm.
is the disruption of harmony, right? The shame behind behind I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't want to make it awkward for the both of us, or I don't want to inconvenience you. by speaking
Yeah.
subpar English. And I think
Hmm.
and I think the inconveniencing, the act of inconveniencing is almost the same as like stabbing yourself for a lot of
Right.
people when you're speaking there. It's
Yeah.
almost the amount of times where I was trying to urge them to speak English, even if even if they might make a mistake, and I'm like, it's okay, you can just speak it. It's okay, I understand, right? They would be like,
Yeah.
oh no,
Yeah.
no, no, sorry, sorry. I know, no, not
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's almost tragic, actually. It's pretty sad.
It's yeah. I feel like as I've been saying like the whole time, like I think am also like that same way. Um like I when I would be trying to like have these conversations, and especially if I was trying to like speak Japanese, I would be like the same way. Like just really like embarrassed that I couldn't like articulate, or even if I could articulate, I couldn't understand like what people are saying, because even in my freaking native language, I have difficulty picking up on those like nuances. Like I need people to really tell me something like straightforward, and that's not how like the Japanese language is at all. It's like some big thing you have to like fucking figure out. Like, okay, they said it's blue, but is it really? What do they mean by this? Like there's like so much going on into like one little thing that they say, or there's like one like word or phrase that depending on context can mean like 20 different things. And so I feel similar to like how like when I've worked with Japanese students to like practice English and stuff like that, and it like they're really struggling to like feel comfortable. I completely sympathize, because I was the exact same way like in Japan. Like it was really hard for me to like challenge myself unless I was drunk. That's where my
Unless
my
I was
Japanese
drunk.
my Japanese would come out full force. And people would be like, "Oh, why don't you speak Japanese? It's really not that bad. You were talking Japanese last night." And I was like, "Was I? Cool." Like,
You ever been so drunk you turn native?
yeah. Suddenly like N1 level, just doing some
Suddenly,
whole
and
like
poetry in Japanese. Allow me to
I have like
recite.
a secret binder of like archaic like poetry.
Allow me to recite Shakespeare in Japanese. uh, that just reminded me. Literally, there was a teacher in semester one. She is okay. Now, any more detail, I'd probably be outing her, but I shouldn't. But a teacher, and this is a class taught in English, and
Mhm.
she said that for both the English and Japanese speaking students, if you want to learn how to speak in the other language, or the opposing language respectively, I think her advice was to be in as many sociable environments as possible, like as many of them as possible. And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" And she's like, "Oh, alcohol." And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
are you condoning the use of alcohol as a teacher to the
Yeah.
students?" And she's like, "It's okay. No one's saying it out loud to anyone."
No, right, right. No, I had people in the States kind of insinuate that
Yeah.
where they're like they, and especially again like the differences in like America and like Japan, like you can go out and get like shit faced with your teachers in Japan. You can't do that in the States. Like your teacher's gonna like lose his job.
Ah, okay.
But they would like insinuate like, "Oh, yeah, you will probably learn most of your Japanese outside of the classroom."
Right,
And
right.
you're like, "What?" Oh, like when we're like studying at home. No, like, when you're hanging out with your friends. Like, "Oh yeah, because they're not gonna like speak English." Maybe, but like
Yeah, yeah.
you'll see when you get there. And you're like, "Okay."
And to clarify, I don't want to condemn the teacher that I was talking about. She didn't explicitly say alcohol. It was just brought up and the students accepted that alcohol could be a factor
Right.
in
Uh, yeah.
in bringing down our inhibitions
Mhm.
behind actually using the language, right? Like
Yeah.
the key point here is using the language despite the mistakes, right? The despite part is the most important part. Like
Yeah.
I think like for you, like if you're drunk, I don't think you're really giving a shit if you
No.
are, yeah, because for some reason, like, at that point you've already embodied the language that you can actually just say it
Right.
like in complete flow, and that
There's not
actually
all
helped it.
that like overthinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and your friends would tell you like, oh, okay, we can talk in Japanese and that's perfectly fine. Yeah, so it was the same for
Mm.
me as well. Like, I know that I'm going to make mistakes, but despite that, I'll still be speaking them. And I think fluency is the minimization of mistakes. But to
Mhm.
know your mistakes, you must first expose them, right? Like
Right.
you must first
Right.
put them out in public, and then people will be like, "Oh, you can improve there. Oh, you can improve there. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, like that's awkward,
Yeah.
or oh, that's inappropriate."
Yeah.
And I learned to take all the shots like firsthand because I've said it out loud,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably like the best lesson to take away from how to learn Japanese is to like immerse yourself in an environment where you're actually going to be saying something out loud.
Yeah.
That really
Yeah.
helps.
Absolutely.
Right. That's probably a good time to stop right there because I'm pretty sure that we're going to be exploring all the other topics that we talked about. Uh,
Yeah.
the more that we build out this Google Doc of all this random shit that we're going to be exploring, because I think, on food, on maybe
Mhm.
on trains, on
Yeah.
uh, on on friendship, like that would be a pretty cool,
Mhm.
interesting thing, and maybe on
Yeah.
specific things that you want to talk about. But yeah, wrapping it up here, is there anything in particular you're looking forward to talking about in a future episode?
Nothing really specific. Like, I'm just excited to talk about this stuff, like in general. Like, it's stuff that I've always wanted to do on like my own like YouTube. But then when it's like just me, it's kind of like, how do I organize this? And it has to be kind of like, you don't want to make like a 30-minute video of yourself just like talking. At least I don't. I feel like pretentious. Like, what do I know? So it's really fun to do it in like a podcast format and just like converse about it and get other people's like opinions and experience too. So I'm excited for all of it, really. I'm sure I'm sure as we go along there will be like certain things that are like more like outlandish and fun, but I'm excited for like the serious stuff too. Like I feel like when you and I talk,
Yeah.
like those are pretty like meaningful, insightful conversations. I walk away from like, damn, yeah, a woke bitch.
Walking broke, get out, woke. How do you say that in Japanese? Uh,
woke,
wo- walk beach,
woke.
walk. How do you even say like? I've always wanted to say like how to say memes in Japanese, like
Oh,
that
yeah,
shito is a rito famu.
we should we should do for like an episode. We should try to research like Japanese slang, like
Ah,
in the outlandish things we say in English. We should try to do something like that.
definitely. But yeah, wrapping it up for now, for our dear listener, for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of
Mhm.
Kanpai Chronicles. I just messed it up. I just filled up my own words, but that's okay. We're keeping that in because we are going in unedited. This is pretty much a teaser episode for the kinds of conversations you could be expecting. Apologies for the name drops for a lot of people. We'll
Yeah.
we'll 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 go into them in greater detail, and I'm pretty sure they don't mind
Mm.
us talking about them, especially the dear friends that we love shitting on because they don't mind taking jabs at us back. To
I
shout
hope
outs
not. We
to
we won't we won't like do anything life destroying.
yeah
Well, if we ever do, we'll make note of that and just cut that out. So
I'll have to cut that out for sure. Like or
yeah,
just like 1 minute bleep like for like
yeah.
something that could potentially be destroying
Yeah,
career
yeah,
ending.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, And of course, many thanks to Rikyo as well. We
Mm,
honestly enjoyed it, right? Despite the comments that we said,
mhm.
should be okay.
We don't like I feel like I wanted to say that earlier on where who we are outside of our studies does not represent
Yes.
Japan or Rikyo at all. Is totally totally I feel like that should be self-explanatory, but just in case, like, Rikyo is a very like well-respected place, like people aren't running around being like hooligans.
Yeah.
um who we are at night is totally different than who we are during the day in our studies. So
Yeah, pretty woke at night. But during the day, we are respectable students of Ryukyu University.
yeah.
And yeah, we'll save it for the next episode. So Holly, thank you so
Mm,
much for being on
yeah.
here. And you've been listening to Kanpai Chronicles, where we'll be cheering on all things Japan inside and outside. So this is your host, Norman,
And Holly.
and thank you.
Bye.